Hello, welcome. So we are here for another installment of native Spanish media that I have been consuming lately. So just a recap of this series. This is movies, shows, YouTube, podcasts, books, etc. All native Spanish content not aimed at learners that I have been consuming. I do not repeat anything in any of these videos, so if it has appeared in a prior video, it's not going to be in here. And I always just like to mention that I am not fluent enough to really comment on the values of any of this. Normally I try to be a fairly critical consumer of media in my native language, but that's just not how I'm approaching it, usually in Spanish, so just something to be aware of. So we will just start really quickly with books. I do have a channel dedicated to books, so if you are interested in more detail, that is always linked below. So I'll just run through the native Spanish books that I have read over the past few months. The first one is El Silencio de la Ciudad Blanca. This is a very, very well-known kind of mystery thriller, crime novel. It has been translated into English, and I believe there's also a movie, maybe? So this is following a detective who has been assigned to the case of a serial murderer that seems like they have kind of resurged, but the person originally charged with the murders like 20 years ago is in prison. He's about to be released, but they are trying to figure out whether it could be a copycat or whether he's sending someone from prison or what is going on. Maybe he never committed them in the first place, that sort of thing. So this was really, really interesting. It is set in Basque country, so you're learning some things about the history and culture. I really enjoyed the mystery aspect of it. Unfortunately, you didn't spend as much time on the mystery aspect as I would have liked. You spent a lot of time on the personal lives of the detective and the people involved, and I did not like most of the characters, and I thought that they made incredibly stupid decisions. So I do have the other two books in the trilogy, and I'm going to give them a try, but I don't know that I will finish the trilogy. We will see how it goes. Next, I read Crónica de una muerte anunciada by Gabriel García Márquez. I had not read this before in English, and so I kind of read them alongside each other, and I think that was a mistake because they kind of started to feel a little bit like a chore, you know? I would read one chapter in English and then read it in Spanish afterwards, and I think I should have read it in English and then read it in Spanish sometime later so that, you know, it wasn't so much work. But anyway, this is a story of basically a murder that happens, and everyone in this little town knew that the murder was going to happen before it happened, and somehow it still was not successfully prevented. And so you're following all these different characters who kind of had some knowledge of it or tried to stop it or miscommunicated in some way, and it's, you know, just very, very interesting. In retrospect, I liked this, I think, more than I realized I did at the time, again, because of how I read it, but I would like to reread it sometime in the future. Gabriel García Márquez is very difficult for me to read in Spanish still. He uses very different vocabulary than a lot of people that I've read. Just has a very, very complex writing style, and that doesn't mean that I'm not going to continue to try to read his works, but it just is something to bear in mind. Then I read Ciudades de Humo, which is a Wattpad work, actually. I did already sell this book. I sell some of my Spanish books on Pango Books, so that will always be linked below, but this was a very, very entertaining sci-fi romance, and I did make a little reader's guide for this, which will also be linked below, that is available for free. And so yeah, this was a story of an android whose life is kind of fully blown up, disrupted when the kind of compound that she lives in is raided by some unknown forces, and she has to run away and try to live as a person because it's not necessarily safe for people to know that she is an android. And so this was really, really entertaining. I did feel like the middle part was kind of slow, and I wish that they had done more like world building and more discussion of things other than the romance, but also I recognize that it is like a Wattpad romance, so I'm probably asking for unreasonable things, but it is a trilogy, so possibly at some point I might listen to future books in the trilogy. We'll see. Then I read Aura by Carlos Fuentes. This is a bilingual edition. This is listed on my Pango Books. This is a short novel, a long short story, whatever you want to consider it. And it is like a horror or super unsettling story. Very, very strange, very disturbing. And I really, really enjoyed reading this. I did think that it was fairly simple to read, you know, not extremely easy by any means, but not super elaborate writing. I do think that the English translation in here is not great. There were a lot of discrepancies that I noticed where the translator seemed to add things or take things away, change things that made sense directly translated. So anyway, I'm obviously far from an expert, but it was very interesting to read something translated side by side like this. So I really enjoyed this, and I would like to read more of Carlos Fuentes' work, but it also, you know, it didn't blow my mind or anything. Then I listened to El Príncipe del Sol by Claudia Ramirez Lomelli or something like that, which I did not realize at the time she is actually a booktuber and wrote this book, I believe, after becoming a booktuber. It is a series, and this is the story of a prince who is a prince of the Sun Kingdom, or whatever you want to call it, and his mother, the queen, goes missing, and so he is going to have to take over as ruler, but he really wants to find out, understandably, what happened to his mother first, and ideally not have to start ruling before he is ready. And so he and his friends, you know, kind of try to figure out what has happened. And it was a really interesting story. I have seen some reviews that it was not very well written from a literal Spanish writing mechanics sense. And as well, I felt like the pacing was kind of off. You know, just all around, it wasn't an incredible book to me, but I also, like, finished it and everything and didn't, you know, think it was awful or anything like that. I don't think I will continue with the series though, but I do have a reader's guide for that one as well. And then I read Las Cosas que Perdimos en el Fuego by Mariana Enriquez. This is an Argentinian author, and this is a collection of short stories. It is horror, and I absolutely loved reading these. I did listen to the audiobook along with it, which I do with any of these if an audiobook is available, but the audiobook narrator for this was incredible in my opinion. I particularly love the Argentinian accent when people have really nice voices. I just think it sounds amazing, and I loved this narrator, and these stories were actually, to me, surprisingly comprehensible. Again, just written fairly straightforwardly, but with a lot of, like, impact. And so I listened to this in English after reading it, and I was surprised by really how much I did understand them. So if you are kind of an intermediate reader, I think that this is a great choice if you are not concerned about the content, because again, these are horror stories, so they do get into some very sensitive topics, and yeah, so check out the trigger warnings if that is a concern, but I really liked this. And then most recently, I listened to the book Todo Esto Te Daré by Dolores Redondo, and this is, again, a crime novel. Our main character is a very successful novelist, and the police, you know, come knocking on his door to tell him that his husband has been killed in a car accident in a completely different part of Spain than he believed him to be at. And so he has to kind of realize that there was a lot that his husband was not telling him, and so he has to kind of come to terms with all of that and try to also uncover what happened, as it seems increasingly like, you know, maybe everything is not what it seems. So I really, really enjoyed this book. It is way too long. This was like almost a 21-hour audiobook, and straight up, this could have been like half as long. Like half as long, easily. Because I would accidentally tune out for, you know, a while, and then I would tune back in and I'd be like, okay, yep, we haven't done anything too dramatic. There were a couple times where I had to go back, you know, and listen to more of it, but I really do wish that this had been shorter, because I really, really liked this book, but again, it was way too long. So I will definitely be checking out more from Dolores Redondo in the future. I know that she is a wildly popular author in Spain. So that is it for the books. Next up, let's talk about movies. I have been trying to watch a lot more movies in Spanish, preferably more classic ones, or well thought of Spanish movies, but sometimes they are kind of hard to find streaming. So anyway, the ones that I have watched recently, the first one is Ardiente Paciencia, and that is, I believe, the first ever Chilean original on Netflix. And this is based on a novel. So this tells a basically love story between two young people in the town that Pablo Neruda lived in. And so he's not like a major part of the plot, but he is kind of a major, you know, figure of the story. I thought that this movie visually was stunning. The soundtrack was beautiful. Everything about this movie was just so beautiful to watch, and I think it was worth it for that alone. The story was very simple, and, you know, there were aspects of it that I didn't really enjoy, but it wasn't a bad story by any means, and I think I would watch this again. It was not incredible to me, but I did really enjoy it. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I watched La Jefa, which is another movie on Netflix from Spain, and I thought I was really gonna like this movie. It had all of the correct vibes and just very interesting setup. So we were following a young woman who starts working for a very, very successful fashion, you know, mogul or whatever, and she, you know, is very ambitious, really admires this woman, and there were definite vibes, you know, there was potential there for something to happen. And what actually happened is that they get into this weird surrogacy situation, and then everything goes to very weird places, and I won't spoil it in case you do want to watch it, but I would like to encourage you not to watch it unless you just want to watch the world burn, I guess. It was not a good movie. Like at all. So then I watched Durante la Tormenta. I believe the next two movies are by the same director, and I'm trying to watch all of their like movies. So anyway, this was a very, very interesting like time travel movie. So this couple moves into this house, and there's kind of a time connection to another time, and they start getting messages. Basically, I'm trying not to give too much away because I do think that this movie is worth watching. They start to kind of get messages across that time and have to try to solve something or resolve something that happened at that same house 20 years ago, maybe? This was really, really interesting. I did not really like the way that it ended. I think there was a massive plot hole, to be honest, but maybe I'm overthinking it. But anyway, I did really like this movie. I thought it was very, very interesting, and yeah, I think it was worth a watch. The next one is Los Renglones. I've never said that word out loud before. Torcidos de Dios. And this one is new, I believe, and this is a like insane asylum movie, which I do not like the use of, you know, mental health institutions, even old terrible ones, for, you know, fear factor. I don't know. I have complicated feelings on that topic, but I did go ahead and watch this, and this is like a you know, mind games, thriller. So this woman goes into an asylum basically to investigate something, and then kind of becomes trapped there, and you don't know what's going on. If this is not a trope that bothers you, again, I think this one was worth the watch. Again, the ending to me was kind of a plot hole, but I understand what they were doing, and I'm not sad that I watched this. We'll just leave it there. Shows. I actually do have some decent shows for once. I have been working on trying to find good Spanish shows, and I do have a couple that I really, really liked. So the first one that I watched is my favorite, and it is La Flor Más Bella, and this is a Mexican show, and I loved this show. This is my favorite show that I have seen in Spanish. Just full stop. It is my favorite. So if I only convince you to do one thing from this video, it should be to watch this show. I am terrified about what they're going to do with it in the future and if they're going to ruin it, but for now, I loved it. So we are following Mitch, who is a high school student, and she kind of dreams of being very popular, successful. She wants to be like a musical theater star. She has two best friends who are also, kind of not outcasts, but do their own thing and are not, part of the popular group. This show includes a lot of different types of sexuality, gender expression, gender identity, I think, and I just really, really loved it. I thought that it was so endearing. It was visually a very, very cool, cute show. There was fun music. The characters were very, very endearing, and it talked about some really, really real and serious issues, as well as just kind of teen angst, and yeah, love this show. Next, I watched El Desorden que Dejas, which is a Spain show. This one was really, really interesting. It is set in Galicia, I believe, and so it actually included some Gallego, which is a language that is spoken in Spain that is very, very close to Spanish, but it is its own language, and so that was very, very interesting. I honestly was not even aware of its existence prior to this. So along with Catalan and Basque and Spanish, it is one of the languages spoken in Spain. So that was really cool. It is only, here and there, so it's primarily Spanish. So we are following a teacher who has come to this area with her husband to kind of get themselves and their finances and everything figured out, and she is basically taking over this classroom in the middle of the school year, and it rapidly kind of evolves, and she discovers that something really weird seems to be going on. She's not really sure what happened to the teacher before her. This was really, really interesting to watch. The characters do a lot of really annoying and stupid things, which can be really frustrating to watch, but I did enjoy this. I did have some issues with, there were things that were used for, shock or plot that I just don't love it when they do stuff like that, but I'm nitpicking again for content. Otherwise, this was really entertaining and a decent watch. Very, very similarly, we next have La Chica de Nieve. This is another Spain show, this time the south of Spain, and very, very similarly, we have a kind of thriller mystery. In this one, a little girl is kidnapped, and they are not able to find her for quite a long time, and so you're following kind of the police and a journalist over the course of this case. And the journalist also has a traumatic past, so this one has quite a lot of trigger warnings, so does the other one, and yeah, I enjoyed watching it. It was very wild, things happened that I was like, you would just be watching and it would be like a normal, kind of mystery suspense show, and then something would happen that was just absolutely wild. But both of these were based on books, and so I don't know if, the books are the same or if it was changed, but regardless, an interesting watch. Not my favorite of all time by any means. And next up we have El Reino, which I just finished watching. This is an Argentinian show, and the next season is coming out in March, which I'm very excited about. This is my second favorite show in this list. I really enjoyed this show. So this is the story of a like kind of televangelist or like fiery evangelical preacher who is selected by a politician to be his running mate for president of Argentina. And then the presidential candidate is killed. And so they're trying to figure out what happened to the presidential candidate, whether this church or this pastor was involved, and, you know, things develop from there. This was also super content warning-y, but I really enjoyed watching this show. I think that it was really interesting and really different from most shows that I have seen in Spanish. You know, a lot more politics. It wasn't like a truly political show. It was mostly about, you know, drama, but there were politics in it for sure. And yeah, I just really liked this. I do like that kind of show, so if you have any more recommendations, I would definitely take them. I saw some reviews online from Argentinians that felt like it was ridiculous because Argentina is not that evangelical, so the idea that this would, you know, happen there, apparently they didn't love that, but to me, I thought this was fairly clearly a parallel to the US, so I don't know, I didn't view this as a judgment on Argentina, I viewed it as a judgment on the US, so anyway, yeah, if you watch it, I would love to know what you think. And then our final category is YouTube. I do have 3 YouTubers to talk about that I have been watching quite a bit lately. The first one is Moonlight Books, and this is, as it sounds like, a booktuber who reads a lot of horror or terror books, a lot of gothic and assorted literary books. I hear about a lot of books from her that I don't hear anyone else talking about, and I definitely want to go through and get more less discussed Spanish books from her channel. And so she has a really cool aesthetic and very good, you know, production quality videos. So if you like reading or that type of book whatsoever, highly recommend her channel. Petite, I don't know if that's how you say that, but Isabelle Petite, her channel name is just that, is a kind of video essayist type channel that I really enjoy watching her videos and also following her on Instagram. She has very easy to understand Colombian Spanish, and I just enjoy hearing her talk about all kinds of different topics. She had a video talking about moving out of your parents' house, like becoming independent, that I thought was really interesting. She talked about the difference in average age from the US, Europe, and Latin America to like move out of your parents' house, and why it is so much more difficult in Latin America than in other places, which, you know, to be honest, it's pretty difficult everywhere, so how much more difficult it is in Latin America is pretty wild to read about or to hear about. And the last one is a little bit random, but it is Amber Black, and this is a perfume video creator. I really like perfume. That's like a random interest of mine. If you happen to also have that very niche interest, she's a very entertaining video creator. You know, she's very charismatic and fun to watch, so I recommend her. That took way longer than I thought, so hopefully I'll be able to edit this video down to something manageable, but thank you for watching. If you have any recommendations of content, definitely leave them below, and I will see you in the next video.